welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon, and quite a bit to tackle on this episode. We're going to give our final thoughts from Georgia's Sugar Bowl loss to Ole Miss. We're going to talk about the transfer portal, who's leaving Georgia, who is being targeted for Georgia at this point as we record this. Probably important for me to say this. We're recording this at 12:03 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday because you might be listening, heck, in half an hour and things could have changed. But at this point, Georgia's got one commit, so we'll talk about that. Talk about NFL draft decisions, who is declared from Georgia, who we're still waiting on, and then we'll finish things out with a little Georgia basketball, and then maybe some Atlanta pro sports news. I want to shout out Ben Wolk coming to us from San Antonio. Ben, thanks for making the time while you're helping down there at the All-American Bowl. How has San Antonio treated you so far?
No, it's been great. And for the purposes of this show, we probably won't talk a whole lot about it. But as always, go to Dawgs247.com because I'll have updates from our check-in. Yesterday, I've already got up there. I've got some other guys that I wasn't able to connect with during the course of the day yesterday that I'll be getting in touch with throughout the course of this week as well. There might be some decisions toward the end of the week that Georgia is involved with at the very least, and whether or not they get those guys, we'll see. But yeah, kind of a great opportunity for me to lay some groundwork in the 2027 class, building relationships for us to be able to provide a season full of coverage to Dawgs247.com.
Well, as much as I know our viewers and our listeners don't want to get into this, let's turn the page back to New Year's Day with Georgia's loss to Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, and just share what's stuck with us, what's sort of still at the top of mind from that loss. I'm still working. I'm hoping Tuesday afternoon I'll have my rewatch story up, but got all my notes done and working on what's going on there. Just things that stood out to me. I didn't think Gunnar Stockton played nearly as poorly as I think all of our message board and most people on social media thought. Thought the second half he was under a tremendous amount of pressure. I thought the interior offensive line really struggled as that game wore on. And really my biggest takeaway on the whole, I think we got into this a little bit after the game, I really underestimated how much Georgia would hurt not having Gabe Harris and not having Drew Bobo. And Gabe Harris really underestimated how good of a job he does setting the edge. And you saw Kewan Lacey being able to get outside. You saw them just struggle to sack Trinidad Chambliss. 2 games at this point against Trinidad Chambliss, 0 sacks. And I thought that was a huge issue. Drew Bobo, I thought that you look at the play where on 4th down they snap it when they weren't expecting to. Drew Bobo wouldn't have that issue, but then elsewhere, Ole Miss's defensive tackles, man, they created a lot of pressure. I thought they got the better of Malachi Tolliver in that interior offensive line, those offensive guards. Thought that really hurt. Elsewhere, something that I definitely took for granted in the moment, how different the end of that game, particularly the fourth quarter, could have gone for Georgia, really Georgia's last drive, if Nate Frazier's healthy. Because Nate had started getting going. Literally the play before he gets hurt, he kind of motions to the sideline like, feed me, like give me the ball more. And not having him toward the end, I think that was Josh McCray that got stuffed on a run down toward the goal line before they throw it on 3rd down. I think that makes the calculus very different for Georgia if they have Nate Frazier, if he had not gotten hurt. So that was something I think on rewatch, especially because during that game, I always write a buzzer story for the game or so. Sometimes those last few minutes turn a little frantic, and sometimes you miss things. So that was something that stood out to me. And 2, just got to tip your cap to Trinidad Chambliss. Just had a great game, and I think something that I'm going to hit on in my rewatch story, but I feel for Georgia's defensive backs on some of those kind of scramble drills that he has. There's only so much you can ask for from the secondary, trying to keep up with those receivers as Trinidad's running back and forth and keeping plays alive. It's a lot to keep up with those receivers, and the receivers got the better of Georgia over the course of the game, and Trinidad had a fantastic game. So I'm sure I'll throw in some other stuff as you guys talk. But Ben, what sticks with you from that game? Anything you want to hit on?
Well, you mentioned they felt some absences, of course. Like people will bring up the sack numbers against Trinidad Chambliss. Like I don't think that Gabe Harris necessarily individually changes that. Like I think that, Trinidad Chambliss was probably going to have a lot of success evading pressure because that's what he does really, really well. Where we did feel Gabe Harris's absence, where we talked about it, Jordan, in the press box during the course of the game, was Kewan Lacey didn't have a ton of success in that first game. In that second game, there were opportunities for Georgia to get Kewan Lacey in the backfield for 1-2 yard losses, and he had a lot of success kicking it outside of the tackles on plays that I don't think were designed that way. And I think Gabe Harris's absence was certainly felt there. You mentioned the interior offensive line struggles. Look, Drew Bobo was one of the most underappreciated players on this football team all season long, and I don't think it's any kind of criticism to Malachi Tolliver to say that being without Drew Bobo, Georgia suffered. I think you felt that in every single game that they played, but you felt that the most there in that second half when they just weren't quite able to establish the run game the way that they would have liked. Talk about absences. Like, I don't know whose responsibilities were what on that 3rd and 5 defensive assignment. I'm sure by now most people that are listening to this have probably seen the clip of DeAndre Baker and Davin Bellamy talking about that play and what they believe they saw and what should have happened. And when you've got the single high safety and KJ Bolden walking down, whose responsibilities are what, like, that would have likely been Ja'Cory Thomas if Ja'Cory Thomas is not out of the game for a targeting penalty. Does it unfold differently? Did they end up having the same amount of trust in Zion Branch in that spot that they maybe would have had in Ja'Cory Thomas, and that puts DeMello Jones in a little bit of an over-leveraged situation? I don't really know. I don't know what everyone was supposed to be doing and what they weren't supposed to be doing, but I think that you look back at that 3rd and 5 play on defense, you look back at that 3rd and 6 or whatever it was on the goal line on offense, and I think that if you can ask Georgia coaches right now, what are the 2 plays that you could have back? I think it would be those 2 plays. Not to say that there weren't other opportunities throughout the game, because I think that there were, like, we mentioned it on the post-game show, like when it's 21-12 and Ole Miss has turned it over on 4th down at midfield, and then you just don't get that first down to be able to give Peyton Woodring a better shot to be able to kick a field goal than what he got. Like, I think that's a spot too, but really it's that 3rd and 5. I know that Glenn Schumann's going to be thinking about that one for a long time and what he might have elected to do differently. I think the same can be said for Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo on the offensive side in that 3rd and goal situation, whether it is an entirely different play that they call or whether it is they choose to run the ball and burn the clock to be able to kick the field goal and make it so that Ole Miss probably isn't taking a shot down the field at the end of regulation. Those are the 2 moments in the game late. And again, that's the final minute and a half of the game. It's typically areas where I feel like Georgia is strong, and they just weren't in that one, and that was the difference.
Yeah, the 3rd and goal throw that you mentioned, I included it in my 5 plays that changed the game. In that moment, going against zone, Gunnar Stockton's got Zachariah Branch. Now, it's not an easy throw. It's not like how did he not hit that? But he has him, and he winds up throwing to Oscar Delp, and they aren't able to complete it. Another play that I noticed it live, but you watch it back, the DPI on Colby Young, if Ole Miss doesn't interfere with him, that might be a wide open touchdown. It was like a stop and go route that when you watch it, the second time, you're like, oh, Colby had a chance to really get open. And, we kind of in the moment, you don't get a lot of great replays, when you're in the press box. And that one and the Lawson Lucky one before were so sort of like, is that DPI? It's kind of hard to know for sure. The Colby one, watching it back for sure. And, that was a play that really mattered. Shout out a few other people. Thought Christian Miller played really well in his last game for Georgia. Elijah Griffin making plays. Quintavious Johnson batting down passes. That was very impressive. What he was able to do. Saw a little bit of Chase Linton, good to get in. Elo Mendoza struggled early on, but I thought he did a better job cleaning up some plays later on in that game. Inside linebackers, I felt like just couldn't get home enough when they tried to blitz them. And I felt like, Ole Miss's receivers deserve a lot of credit, I think as much as Trinidad. Trinidad had a great game, but his receivers made some big plays. But it was sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't with how Georgia wanted to play Ole Miss. You play man-to-man, and they were able to make some plays. You play zone, well, you're going to need to be able to create pressure. Trinidad's going to have a lot of time, and Georgia just really struggled to create pressure. And Trinidad's a really talented quarterback, and he took advantage and made a lot of plays that wound up hurting Georgia when it was all said and done. Kipp, what stuck with you from that Sugar Bowl? What do you want to shout out looking back at that loss?
Well, first of all, you guys nailed my first 2 talking points. I think the 3rd down decisions on offense and defense, just doom Georgia. Like any Georgia fan that sees this game, it's going to be a complete hate watch because the coaching decisions, those were just coaching mistakes. But at the same time, I again have to point out that it took an all-world game from Gunnar Stockton to win the first time these two teams played. So going into this, thinking that you had a margin of error for Gunnar to be the same quarterback he started to revert back to at the end of the season, I just don't think that's feasible. But I keep coming back to the fact that Georgia gave up 27 points in the second half. I mean, like Georgia's team all year long has been about halftime adjustments, shutting down, being that third and fourth quarter team and dominating opponents in that part of the game. And they did not do that on defense in this game. I mean, like that's the worst, like one of the worst defensive halves you've seen from Georgia. And yeah, you could just say like tip your cap to Trinidad Chambliss, hell of a player. Who knows? Maybe you'll have to face him again at this point with the way things are going. But you can't just pin it on that. I think it's there. It just the defense looked different, especially when Raylan Wilson and you're not having Ja'Cory Thomas out. The defense just looked different, and I think that's something you go into the offseason going like we need to avoid these situations. And the other situation you have to avoid is Gunnar Stockton was just too hesitant to throw the ball downfield, and every opposing defense knew it. Like I mean, like. Credit to Zachariah Branch for the prolific season he had, but every one of his throws basically to him was behind the line of scrimmage. So every team knows like they're not even going to attempt to throw the ball down the field. And the couple times that Gunnar did, I mean, we had batted passes. You kind of saw maybe that's why he doesn't do it. And so I think that is something all offseason where Georgia's got to figure out like when we get to the playoffs again, like teams are we're going to have to be able to push the ball vertically down the field. And that is the biggest question mark. And it came up in this game, and it's to me a top three reason why Georgia is not, playing in the semifinals right now. It's because their offense did not test anyone vertically. And when your running backs are banged up, like what is your offense at that point? And that's what doomed them. And like I said, it was both facets of the game because you just can't give up that many points.
Yeah, when we talk later in the week, I'll do a stats that define Georgia's 2025 season. I haven't looked at this number yet, but I'm fascinated to see Gunnar Stockton's average depth of target and also yards per completion because I think Kipp's right. And Ben, I wanted to kind of put it out there for folks because we were both guilty of this at halftime. We always play the does Georgia win this game with our buddy Connor Riley from Dog Nation. It's something that Palmer Tom's gone but not forgotten kind of started. And we were both like, yeah, Georgia wins this game. You're telling me that a Kirby Smart team's going to give up a double-digit lead, and I'll be damned if that's not exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I said it at the time. I was very confidently saying Georgia's going to win. Georgia doesn't lose the game that they just lost. Like to Kipp's point, they gave up 27 second-half points. That's what it took for Georgia to be able to lose this game. I mean, Kipp talks about the all-world game that Georgia needed from Gunnar Stockton the first time around. Like, think about what Ole Miss had to do to be able to win that football game. They just scored 27 second-half points. They had to have Trinidad Chambliss go for 360 yards. Like, they had to have Georgia make some pretty ill-advised coaching decisions in the final 2 minutes. Like, it took that from Ole Miss to be able to pull it off as well. So I was thinking that this morning. Like, I've gone through replaying some of the moments, and it's like, man, how did it play out that way? Like, I'm still, and I can only imagine that people in that building, how they feel about it as they've rewatched film and things like that. Like, how many little moments just didn't quite go right? I mean, even like things that Trinidad did amazing when he's doing his little circus scramble maneuver around 3 Georgia defenders back-to-back plays, and they get a little one to Kejuan Lacey, and then they get the big one that converts the first down. Like, there were just so many little moments that turned out to be like that one moment was the difference in Georgia playing in 2 days and Georgia's season being over.
Yeah, and just think about in that moment, and this is not to place a lot of blame on KJ Bolden, but if he kind of just wraps up rather than delivering a big hit, I mean, he stopped about a yard short, and Ole Miss has to punt there. That's just kind of the nature of what that game was. So something, they're going to have to make peace with it, and they're going to have to build and grow from it, getting ready for 2026, flip the page very quickly. And speaking of that, it's been a very busy week to this point, as Georgia has been very busy in the transfer portal. In a few minutes, we'll talk about some of the guys who have left Georgia, some of the guys that have moved on and are looking for a fresh start somewhere else. But I want to start, guys, with the first portal addition for Georgia during this cycle, and that's Khalil Barnes from Clemson. Hometown kid from nearby Bogart, played at North Oconee. 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's got 1 year of eligibility left from his time at Clemson. Coming off a pretty productive season for Clemson, 40 tackles, 2 pass breakups for a Clemson team that admittedly did not live up to expectations. But we knew, Ben, that Georgia was going to really target the safety position during the transfer portal cycle. They take care of that, at least to start things off, by getting Khalil Barnes. What are your thoughts on this addition and what Khalil Barnes is going to add to this defense?
I think it's one of those situations when you have a guy that was formerly a local product that's played some big time football at a program like Clemson, where they have established culture and proven development on the defensive side of the ball through the years, that you can't turn a guy like that away. Like, you need bodies like that. We know what Georgia tried to do in the transfer portal last time around with the safety haul, and I wouldn't say that the hit rate at safety was what Georgia would have liked to be last time around. I don't think that you can afford to, pick and choose necessarily at the safety position. I think that if Khalil Barnes wants in at Georgia, you got to be willing to have him. Now, I think that means that Georgia's done at safety? Not necessarily, but it also becomes like, who's available to you? I mean, Ty Benefield is a Boise State transfer that has been linked to Georgia. He signed with LSU since we've been taping this, so that's another one that's off the board. Edwin Joseph, a Florida State transfer, someone that's been on a Texas round trip and has been scheduled to be at Georgia by Thursday this week. But again, anytime that you are playing the waiting game, as we saw with an LSU offensive tackle earlier today, when you're playing the waiting game to get a guy on campus and then you don't, you might be SOL. Like, that guy might sign at the place that he's visited already. So I think you start to fret a little bit about that. So there was no question Georgia wanted to ensure that they got a safety in this portal cycle. I think that they would like to take 2 safeties in this portal cycle, adding one alongside Khalil Barnes. But yeah, I mean, he fits. It makes sense. Great culture fit. He has friends. Him and Kamari Brooks both are from North Oconee. I've talked with Kamari Brooks, but well before Khalil Barnes entered the transfer portal, or even the thought that he could end up anywhere other than Clemson was a thing. And like, he always talks about Khalil Barnes as being like the guy that was his leader, that he looked up to in high school, that he kind of became the player and person that he was because of him looking up to Khalil Barnes. That says a lot, because Kamari Brooks is the type of guy that I think every high school recruit should look up to and operate the way that he does, because that's the type of guy that Kamari Brooks is. So yeah, I made the joke to Kamari Brooks at some point a few weeks ago when Khalil Barnes intended to enter the portal, that there was maybe a KB times 2 that's going to be in Athens, and that is now going to be the case. And I know that Kamari Brooks and some others around the North Oconee community are certainly very, very pumped that this guy is going to be in Athens next season.
Yeah, you got those guys and Landon Roldan, a real North Oconee flavor there in Athens at this point. I watched just a few highlights of Khalil, and I think some of what I watched were a little bit earlier in his career. Seems like a pretty short tackler, even though looking at some of the pro football focused numbers, looked like tackling was a bit of an issue this year. But I think he's a veteran guy that you throw into a room with a lot of questions. Ja'Cory Thomas has moved on. Jaden Harris, who's a guy that played, I think, more star for Georgia this year, he has transferred, and we'll mention him a little bit when we talk about some of the other guys who have left. You're looking at Kyron Jones, who's been hurt, and waiting to see what happens next with him. You got to figure out what you're going to do beside KJ Bolton. And to me, this makes sense for the things that Ben said. I mean, a local guy, a guy that's been proven at the Power 5 level. I think they want to go add another safety, as Ben said. And it's just a gamble. You want to try to get these guys on campus as quickly as possible, because teams make a position like safety a huge priority, and you don't want to be caught waiting and hoping that a guy's going to make a visit because, like Ben said, in the time we've been recording this, which has only been about 20 minutes, a guy that we saw as a real option for Georgia has gone off the board. So big to get Khalil Barnes, but I think there's more specifically with safety that Georgia's going to be trying to add. Kipp, what are your thoughts on this addition for Georgia and just how he's going to fit in?
Well, I think his production, his experience, and the fact that, again, he clearly grew up a fan of Georgia. I mean, that's not nothing. That's not something that shouldn't play a factor when Kirby Smart and the coaching staff spent all offseason with the mantra of fire, passion, and energy. So I think, in the transfer portal era, you can't look at him and go, oh, this guy's just a one-year mercenary. He's getting an opportunity now because of the transfer portal to go play for a program that he grew up rooting for. So I think as a fan, when a lot of people are kind of disillusioned with the transfer portal, you should be excited for a hometown kid coming back and getting a chance to contribute to Georgia. As for what it means, you saw what happened in the secondary this season. Rashawn Dinkins, a true freshman, got thrown in the mix late in the season and at the star position in the SC championship in the Sugar Bowl. Sure, he might be coming back as the entrenched starter next season, but how often do you go the whole season with just one guy starting? We just saw you don't. So I think between a Ja'Cory Thomas and Jonel Guerrero, like, you want to have guys that behind your starters that you can kind of depend on. And I think that is exactly what Khalil Barnes brings to the table. I think he's a guy that Georgia should feel comfortable with if he is a starter, and then feel great about if, like, he cross trains at safety and star and ends up maybe being the next man up of both positions, which I think would be a great fit for him. I kind of see him really being able to step in at the star position and push for Rashawn Dinkins and either whoever else is at the star position. I think that would kind of be a great fit for him in Georgia's system. And if they add another safety, which we all think they will, that kind of solves that issue of where you want to make sure you have proven contributors at both of those spots heading in the offseason, knowing that you're returning KJ Bolden, one of the best safeties in the country.
Fascinated to see how this plays out, especially with Jonel Aguero. I want to see, is he coming back to Georgia? Does he maybe make a position change? Does he wind up playing safety and being an option there? That's something I think we'll get a better feel for in these next few days. Wanted to go through some of the names to know. Ben did a good job of throwing up some of these names on Dawgs247.com on Tuesday morning. Vanderbilt receiver Trey Richardson, Auburn defensive end Amaris Williams. There's been some smoke about Isaiah Canyon, the receiver from Georgia Tech, as well as being an option. Shout out some of the other names that we're kind of paying attention to for Georgia right now. Ben mentioned this already, but Florida State safety Edwin Joseph, USC cornerback Braylon Conley, who already visited Georgia, and then Oklahoma cornerback Gentry Williams. I'll throw it to you, Ben. Anyone in particular in that mix that really stands out to you? And if there's any names that we didn't say that are worth shouting out, please go ahead.
Well, the three that you mentioned that are today, Trey Richardson plays one season in the SEC, has 800 yards and 7 touchdowns. We know that Georgia has taken a Vanderbilt wide receiver with a lot of speed out of the portal in the past. So it's an interesting one. It's a guy that's been, if you go look at his playing history, some people might be a little unenthused by the fact that he's been at junior college in Toledo and Washburn and then Vanderbilt, and now he's hitting the transfer portal again. But I think that everybody knows that you're going and getting a 1-year rental in a guy like this, so it really doesn't matter a whole lot in terms of what he's done in the past or how many places he's been in the past. Like, you're getting a guy that wants to go, prove himself 1 year and go make the league. And so that's an interesting one to me. Isaiah Canyon, totally different body types. And I think that's, from what I can tell, Georgia's trying to get one guy that's more of that speed, potentially slot variety to backfill what you're losing from Zachariah Branch. They are still confident in what they have with Scovie White-Helton. So I am interested to see how far they go to try and recruit somebody else at that similar type of position. But then also you got an Isaiah Canyon type that's 6'4", more in that, Colby Young, Noah Thomas type of wide receiver. I don't know that he's as physical necessarily as those types of guys, but in terms of the size and the window of target that you would be getting, I think he's similar there. There is another wide receiver that I do believe that Georgia is going to be tied to by the end of the week as well. I have already written about that earlier in the week over at Dawgs247.com, but I'm going to save that for the folks that are over at Dawgs247.
And that's why he's one of the best in the business. I did want to point out with Isaiah Cannon that Josh Crawford recruited him to Georgia Tech because he was the receivers coach there.
Also high school teammates with Isaiah Gibson and Rayshawn Dinkins. So Georgia was very familiar with them. I know that group is all very close to one another, especially Dinkins and Canyon.
The receiver, especially Canyon, is the guy that really catches my attention because it seems like X is going to be a big need, both losing Colby Young and Noah Thomas. But Amaris Williams, I mean, if Georgia is able to finish off and finalize that one, that would be a huge addition. Former 5-star, a guy that I think still has a ton of potential. You add him to the defensive line, I think that you feel really good about where things are going into 2026. Kipp, anyone from that group we just talked about stick out to you, guys that you're particularly interested in as we follow this portal cycle?
This feels like the most important day of the portal cycle. Like, this is the don't let them leave campus. Like, you can't talk about how the guys that haven't even made it to Athens yet, you can't really see as, liable options because the other teams are doing exactly what I'm saying Georgia needs to do. And that's exactly where things stand today, I think. There are other guys out there, and there are definitely other positions that Georgia's going to be probably looking at, like offensive tackle. But as far as the needs that, they're currently trying to address, these look like, the top targets, if not the most important targets that Georgia's been able to really get in contact with right now. I mean, go ahead and knock out wide receiver right now. Bring in those guys, and you've immediately solved one of your, I guess, top 2 or 3 needs from the portal this offseason. Get an edge guy. We obviously saw what not having Gabe Harris did in game, and watching Trinidad Chambliss just run around and play backyard football all day. You need to get some help in there, some depth in that room. So I just think these guys just make a ton of sense for Georgia. And then, if you come out of that, if you land those guys, you can center all your focus to what looks like, the top remaining need, which is offensive tackle.
A shout out to Caleb Herring, the edge from Tennessee. He's a guy we are also expecting to visit Georgia a little bit later this week. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the guys who have portaled out of Georgia, what we think of those decisions, any big losses among, I believe it is now 7 guys who have announced that they are portaling. Talk about the NFL draft decisions, the guys who have declared for Georgia, some big names we're still waiting on. Then we'll finish things off with a little Georgia basketball. Like I mentioned before the break, guys, at this point, Georgia has had 7 players enter the portal. A couple we already knew in the lead up to the portal opening, cornerback Daniel Harris and tight end Pierce Spurlin. Pierce Spurlin, a guy that would have to transfer because he had been medically disqualified from Georgia. But looking at some of the other names that have announced they are going to enter the portal and look for a new home at the collegiate level, running back Roderick Robinson, offensive tackle Nair Daniels, defensive tackle Jordan Thomas, outside linebacker Chris Jones, and safety Jaden Harris. At this point, as we record this, Jaden Harris is the only one who has announced where he is transferring to. He is headed to Kansas. So, Kipp, I'll start with you. Hit me with your initial thoughts. Anyone stand out to you among those guys that are looking to leave Georgia, and any thoughts just in general of this portal group?
I know I'm going to get blamed for this by even saying it, but I'm actually surprised at how few transfer departures Georgia's had so far, given the fact that, there's 2 days left before the window closes. A reminder to everyone that doesn't mean anyone has to make decisions. They just have to get their name in by then. But I honestly expect it to be closer to to double this. That's just normal, though. That's not like the sky is falling. I just think that around a dozen portal departures is pretty normal for Georgia. It's actually abnormal for most programs. I mean, most programs you see a two deep at a lot of programs depart in the portal every offseason because they're just transferring teams out. No one really stands out to me. I mean, Chris Jones is kind of an intriguing player, but once you saw like a guy with a similar skill set and Zayden Walker kind of getting on the field ahead of him, you kind of saw, okay, maybe he's not a sure guy to get a consistent number of snaps next season, or maybe he wants to play a specific position. But yeah, I think as far as the offensive line is concerned, that's a position where I thought maybe we'd see more departures by now. And again, I'm not asking for Georgia to have more guys leave. I just think that given the numbers they have there and the fact that, they're bringing some talented guys in, I just thought that might be one where the competition next spring seems like it's going to be a little heated. So as of right now, I guess credit to Georgia for the retention so far, being able to keep a lot of these guys because even if they didn't see the field a lot this year, these are guys that might be able to help out Georgia next year.
Yeah, I believe the portal is open until January 10th, so we could see some more names go in there. But Kipp hit on the biggest thing. I mean, there's really not been a shocker to this point. That's not to say that there won't be, but to this point, it's been fairly quiet. I think, honestly, the biggest loss of this group is Roderick Robinson, more because of 2026. I thought Josh McCray, the Illinois transfer, kind of supplanted him in his role. Well, now Josh is gone. He's out of eligibility, and Roderick's gone too. So you're going to need kind of a bruiser back, a guy that you could count on in some of those short yardage situations. But on the whole, I think Georgia's sitting pretty right now with what it's lost. But now it's all about retention, trying to survive the rest of this week, and to hold on to who you've got and who you want for 2026. Ben, any thoughts on this group that has decided they're going to portal from Georgia? Anything you feel like sharing?
I mean, no real surprises yet, I guess you could say. I mean, everything, like everyone that's entered the portal at this point, I think any reasonable person can look and say that makes sense why they would have hit it. Now, I think typically the ones that you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that one coming, are going to be happening in the 11th hour of the portal window because one, Georgia's probably spending this whole time trying to retain them before they enter the portal. And two, if they are doing any of that last minute negotiating or whatever it is, they're going to want to enter that at the final moment so that there's no possible necessary. Well, I mean, they could technically always come back, but it just, like, I think Damon Wilson last year was like one of the last days of the portal window. Like, that's just how it kind of happens. And that's not to try and instill fear in everyone listening into this and say, oh my gosh, you need to be waiting 3 more days and all of a sudden panic is going to set in Athens. That's not what I'm saying. But there will be across the entire country a couple of interesting names, I'm sure, that enter the portal in the final 24 hours because it just makes more sense from a negotiation standpoint to do it that way.
No, for sure. And it's one of those things, sincerely, you need to stay glued to Dawgs 24/7 because, again, we're recording this. It's 12:35. In an hour's time, things could change really quickly. So we hope that you guys will stay glued because it's a wild ride. As someone who's, following it, I can only imagine what it's like for the fans. All right, let's talk about some of the NFL draft decisions. At this point, Georgia has had 3 players announce that they are going pro and entering the 2026 NFL draft. Defensive tackle Christian Miller, wide receiver Zachariah Branch, linebacker C.J. Allen. I'll go through this real quick. Honestly, none of those are a surprise as far as I'm concerned. There had been a little bit of talk, some stuff behind the scenes. I had heard that, well, maybe they could keep Zachariah Branch, and maybe I should have really rode this harder on the board, but I just didn't see it. I just thought this is a guy that probably locked in as a top 50 pick, a guy who maybe he winds up testing his way into being a first round pick. I just didn't see that happen. The other 2, Christian Miller and C.J. Allen, I thought those guys were locks to go pro. Huge losses, really, with all 3. I mean, Christian Miller, a great guy up front, guy you could count on to make plays, and a guy that I think they're going to sorely miss, even with some really young, experienced and defensive line talent that has a lot of potential, but it's going to be asked to fill bigger roles. C.J. Allen, man, I know that room is deep, but man, that dude makes plays. And when he was really going, when he was 100% this year, I don't know that there was a better linebacker in the country. And then I'll shout out Zachariah Branch. They are going to have a huge hole to fill. Losing him, just his ability, his shiftiness. I mean, just make a cut and turn, a throw at the line of scrimmage into a 25-yard touchdown. That was just that was a gifted guy, and I think, once Georgia got him in and got to really know him, I think they realized too just what a great culture fit he was. So all three huge holes, significant losses for Georgia. Let's start with those three, and then we'll talk about some of the decisions we're still waiting on. But I'll go with you, Ben. What do you think about what Georgia's lost, the decisions with Christian Miller, Zachariah Branch, and C.J. Allen going pro?
Sort of like I said with the transfer portal stuff, it's like none of them are surprising. Like I think all of those guys should be going to the league. I think that they have all played their way up into better draft positions than they were probably in at the start of the season. There's no question that you're going to feel the impact of that. Like Georgia didn't get a ton of interior defensive line pass rush this season, and Christian Miller was kind of that veteran presence holding it down there. Zachariah Branch, it goes without saying, like, I don't know how you don't ever replace Zachariah Branch. Like players like that, the reason we're all so amazed by the things that Zachariah Branch does, even the little things, is because you just don't see players that move like that. That doesn't really exist a whole lot out there. So I don't think that you can necessarily replace that. I mean, in CJ Allen's case, not a surprise that he's going, but of course you're losing some defensive leadership there. Like he was probably that guy in the room this season, him and Christian Miller both. So, Kirby Smart has this conversation every spring. Who are the people that step up as leaders? And when Christian Miller is gone, when CJ Allen is gone, like I think you got to look around and say, who is it that's going to step up? There's some obvious likelihoods, like, KJ Bolden's going to be that third year guy. Jordan Hall's someone that I suppose could still be in the room that will have some of that leadership as well. If Raylan Wilson decides to stick around, I'm sure that he will step up and do a little bit more of that as well. But there's going to need to be more guys that become those leaders in that room without those two players on defense.
To your point about C.J. Allen, I think when he had to miss time, the Charlotte game, and even when he was not 100% for the Georgia Tech game, I think that linebacker room kind of rallied around him. That speaks to how well he's respected and what he means to that defense. Kipp, what do you think about these losses for Georgia and the shoes that some of these younger guys are going to have to fill?
Yeah, I mean, having the most prolific pass catcher in Georgia program history departing is a pretty big shoe to fill right there. And I think you probably won't see it filled with one guy. And I think that's kind of where Georgia's going to go with this, with all of these departures. I think that Christian Miller is probably one of the more underrated guys in Georgia's program the last couple of seasons, just because he's not going to stack up stat-wise with a lot of the other defensive tackles. And it just kind of goes back to Georgia's calling card on the defensive line. He was asked to do a lot more than just get in the backfield. Now, did they want him to get in the backfield? I think so. Like whenever he got back there, I think that was kind of a bonus for Georgia. But he was doing a lot of dirty work. And I think, when CJ declared for their draft, he should have probably, thank Christian Miller for the fact that he had all those clean paths to the ball. That was just something that Christian, never one complained about that guy. Like one of the more enjoyable guys to talk to, but it was never like, man, I got to get my numbers up, or I'm going to hit the portal so that I can, just go out there and play free all the time. So I just think he is not going to be talked about a lot because he wasn't, part of that back-to-back championship run, or at least a big role. But he is kind of a callback to those defensive linemen. And I think all three of these guys CJ's probably going to be one of those 28 to 32 guys. Somehow the Eagles will find a way to get him too. It's just lock him in. Probably all three of these guys for that matter. But I do think that Christian will probably go in the 40s. Zachariah Branch, for me, it's tough because he gets mentioned a lot as a first-round guy, but gadget players don't, which is technically what he was at Georgia. Those guys have not projected well in the NFL, and we all know from seeing him, he's he's going to measure in a little bit differently than what he was listed at Georgia. So I think when you say top 50, I think that's right where I think he goes, 50. But I think that's a great spot for him. And so, yeah, none of these decisions are surprising. If you're going to be a top 50 selection, unless you just are a quarterback and it's like you see top 10 money and you're getting offered first round money to play college football, there's no reason to come back and risk that, because you're unless you're a quarterback, you're taking a lot of injury risks out there. So I think it all makes sense. And for Georgia, this is just what it's like. I mean, they always have to replace guys like that. If they don't, that's when you have to start worrying about Kirby Smart's roster, is when they don't have more than 2 or 3 guys who are going to be top 50 picks in the draft coming out.
The two things I wanted to say, well, a couple things. C.J. Allen, 81 tackles this year. I mean, he was a monster. But the two things I'll remember Christian Miller for, one, playing on a bum shoulder in that Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame. And I talked to him afterwards, and he was a fantastic interview. I'll have to go find that story. Just him talking about how badly he wanted to be out there to help his team. And two, one of the last plays he made, I just remember him making a tackle with no helmet in that game against Ole Miss. Don't think you're allowed to do that, but he got away with it with his helmet laying on the ground. So that was pretty impressive as well. Well, so we've mentioned those 3, and there's some other announcements that we're still waiting on. And I'll go with what I see as the big 3. I think there's some other ones, but offensive tackle Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle Ernest Green, inside linebacker Raylan Wilson. Those feel like the big 3. Am I missing anyone else? I guess Peyton Woodring, the kicker, as well. Is there another name I'm missing besides those 3? All right, I'll throw it to you, Ben, with those 3. Just what do you make about the decisions they've got to make, but more importantly for Georgia, what it will mean for Georgia, whether or not they come back?
It's got to be the offensive tackles, and I'd say that in tandem with what we've already alluded to on the transfer portal side of things, where Monroe Freeling, I think, is getting really positive feedback from the NFL, and I think that's going to make it really hard for Georgia to be able to sell him on coming back. I think that Ernest Green probably thought that he was going to be – that last year was his NFL draft year, and things just didn't quite pan out from an injury standpoint. So are you going to be able to make him have 3 years in a row where he feels like he's going into his NFL draft year, or does he just want to – move on, even if his draft status isn't necessarily what he envisioned it being? I bring up all that to say, I don't think Georgia has clear answers for what the offensive tackles would be next season. I mentioned the LSU offensive tackle, Carius Kern, that ends up signing with Ole Miss today. I know that one's going to sting for Georgia. Another one happened while we were on here as well. Ori Williams, another LSU offensive tackle that he wasn't as linked to Georgia, to be fair, but there was consideration that he was going to visit Georgia after he visited Auburn. He doesn't end up, I don't even know for sure if he ends up making it to the Auburn visit, but he definitely never made it to the Georgia visit and signs with Tennessee before any of that plays out anyways. So you're having to go down the board a little bit, and you start thinking about the past. And I know 2020 hindsight, if you knew that Monroe was going to be leaving and Ernest was going to be leaving for sure, and it might have changed, and you are going to miss on Carius Kern, it might change the way you do certain things. Do you spend differently on Jermaine Mitchell, because that means that he's a guy that's going to be a year 1 offensive tackle play? Do you handle the Jackson Cantwell recruitment differently way back when, if you think that he's someone that maybe has the opportunity to be a day 1 impact guy? I don't know the answer to that, but you start looking around the room as it sits right now. Michael Uni hasn't played a ton of football, and he's been more as an offensive guard. Would they feel comfortable having him as being one of the 2 tackles next season? I don't know. Juan Gaston is one where I think everyone just says, oh, Juan Gaston can fill one of the tackle spots. Well, they played him a lot more at guard this season, obviously, than they did at tackle, and he wasn't the sharpest freshman interior offensive lineman that Georgia had this season. And so do you feel completely comfortable as a true sophomore having Juan Gaston out there compared to some proven, experienced guys that may or may not be in the portal right now? I don't know, but that's a long-winded way of saying, Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green, I don't feel great about their chances of sticking around at Georgia at this point, but those are the 2 that I think Georgia, if they're having to double down with their conversations with them about selling them on staying versus going, those are the two guys that you have to double down on at this point, because if you lose both of those guys, I really don't know what Georgia's tackle situation is going to look like next year and how confident Georgia is going to be able to be going into next season at that position, which is obviously a critical position in college football and one that is a pretty lucrative position in college football. And so for the folks that are out there that question Georgia's approach in terms of how they handle portal recruitments or even high school recruitments when it comes to the NIL side of things, like, a year where you don't have clear answers at tackle because you underspent might be the wake-up call that Georgia needs to realize you can't live that way.
Kipp, let's kind of explore that a little further. Let's say that Monroe and Ernest both declare. How bad of a situation do you feel like Georgia is in with its offensive tackles?
I need to see Georgia's budget numbers. I mean, like, how much do they have at this point? And, what are the top guys getting? Like the top guys that are available right now, like Tennessee offensive lineman Lance Hurd, Michigan's Andrew Sprague. Like, I'm just going through the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings. Wolk and Formby from Alabama. Like, these are guys that you should probably have already talked to, because these are your biggest recruiting pitches are going on right now. And I get it. They're battling and trying to keep both Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green. Keeping one of them would be a huge win. We don't think at this point, I would say they're leaning towards losing both of them. So if that's where you think you are, then you need to go and look at your numbers and go, okay, what can we do? And I get it. Fans hear that and they roll their eyes, but like, that's just the way it is. Like, if you want to go out there and have offensive tackles that you feel good about going into the spring, knowing you got talent on your roster, but knowing they haven't proven anything, then you got to make sure that the numbers work. And I think right now, even with Georgia in the retention stage and having this really talented roster, that is where they got to, I don't know. If you got to go find a coupon code, do it, because you got to make, coming out of this transfer portal, losing both of your tackles NFL and not grabbing at least one guy with starting experience, I think we can chalk that up as the first real big. I'm not going to say like Georgia's a loser in the transfer portal, because we just talked about a lot of things, guys that they can add that are really talented players, but offensive tackle is just different. I mean, we even saw like Monroe Freeling didn't even have his best game against Ole Miss. But you got to at least get comparable play at one of those offensive tackle positions going into the spring, because then you can at least have a competition at the other spot and make some things work, maybe move some guys around. But you got to get someone, whether it's one of your guys you got right now or a guy in the portal, and there's only so many of those guys. The guys I named, there's probably a pretty significant drop-off after the top 5 guys available in the transfer portal right now. But as you guys said, there's still time in the transfer portal. Georgia might get a gift like 3 days from now and just have somebody with Georgia connections go into the portal who started 2 seasons. But as we're recording, I'm just saying, like, there's only so many guys available, and Georgia hasn't gotten any of them on campus yet. And that is where you're like, okay, you're missing some budget battles here. I think this is where Kirby might not have to go beyond his comfort level and pay someone.
I'm going to make a bold prediction, not obviously being locked into all these conversations. I say Raylan Wilson comes back, but that they do lose Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green. So those will be 2 significant losses. It's just, with Monroe, I just don't see a world with how highly I think he'll be considered as an offensive tackle that he comes back. Ernest is one I can definitely see coming back. But I think, he's been in the program now for 4 years, and I think he'd like the opportunity to go play in the NFL, following in his father's footsteps, and have a chance to play in the NFL. I'll ask both of you, any predictions how you think these 3 play out?
I'll go first since Ben is muted and say that Georgia loses both offensive tackles and Raylan Wilson does come back, which again, I'm over here saying, being a doomsday guy. Raylan Wilson coming back would just be a huge win for Georgia's defense. I know that they have really talented sophomores in Chris Cole and Justin Williams, but I think Raylan Wilson, at times was playing outstanding football for Georgia, and they could really use a leader like that in that position room coming back.
Yeah, both tackles are going, and that Raylan Wilson will come back. And I do think, I spent a lot of time talking about the tackle side of things. Raylan Wilson coming back will be very, very important, just because as good as Justin Williams is and as good as Chris Cole is, he's played a lot more football in Athens than those two guys have. And I think you just want to have some more experience in that room when you can.
100%. We'll always like pointing out to stay glued to Dawgs 24/7. We'll have the latest on those draft decisions. Like we talked about, Kipp, there's still a little bit of a window, right, for these guys to make the decision, which is good, I guess, from their standpoint, but also Georgia needs to have these decisions made pretty soon.
Yeah, the window is pretty insane. I believe the deadline to declare for the draft is January 14th. And then Georgia's drop ad is, I believe, January 12th to the 16th. So if we're talking about like getting an NFL decision you weren't prepared for, or a last minute Ernest Green and Monroe tell them on the night of the 13th, that's a real quick window if they were banking on those guys being their offensive tackles to go in and finding a guy. So it's a very tight window for Georgia. I would imagine they would want to know sooner rather than later.
All right, Georgia men's basketball minute, and hard to get all of what we saw on Saturday in 1 minute. Georgia beats Auburn 104-100 in overtime. Before I get into this, Kipp, were you watching this thing live? Because it was a whirlwind.
It was. I was just imagining like your impressions article or instant reaction article was probably had to be written 4 or 5 times in the span of 2 or 3 minutes. The last minute of basketball in that game, that is I guess a clinic on what not to do, but credit to Auburn. They just kept battling and Georgia, you thought they'd just given it away at that point momentum, but they woke up in overtime and got it done. So there were like 2 or 3 games within that game. There was nothing said in our house for about an hour.
Georgia wins 104-100. Georgia was up 5 with 5 seconds left in regulation, and they call a foul on Jeremiah Wilkinson. I'm going to say this. That was not a foul. That was a terrible call. But Keyshawn Hall hits 2 free throws, misses the third one. Perfect bounce to Kevin Overton. And, man, Kevin Overton got it in one fell swoop, went up, put the shot in, forced overtime. But ultimately, Auburn not having Tahad Pettiford, who had fouled out in overtime, that just crushed them. Jeremiah Wilkinson with 2 big three-pointers. And all of a sudden, Georgia's now number 18 in the country. Ben, I don't know if you got to watch any of that game.
Oh, yeah.
If you did, share your thoughts. And also, what were the chances that I could have told you before the season Georgia's going to play Florida the second week of SEC play? One of those teams is ranked, and that team is the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I'd still tell you Florida's probably going to be a 10-point favorite because they are still a 10-point favorite tonight, and I think that's a pretty good indicator of where those teams actually are in the minds of the college basketball world. But not to be a knock on Georgia. Best start in what I see since 1931 or something like that. Not the best final 5 seconds of regulation, but as someone who, as you know, Jordan, has been tracking the journey to 100, overtime wasn't a bad – I thought the journey to 100 was dead once we got into conference play. I was kind of rooting for double OT because I was like, they just need 9 more points, and they're going to get to 100 points per game on the season, which is the irrelevant, arbitrary metric that I've been tracking for no reason whatsoever during the course of the season. But, yeah, we'll learn a lot about this Georgia basketball team tonight. They go on the road to Gainesville. I don't think it's going to be an easy test going on the road to Gainesville, despite how these two teams have played so far this season. I think I've mentioned this in the past. I have this sort of system, if you will, on AP. If you're an unranked team in the AP poll that is a favorite at home against a team that is ranked in the AP poll, that team covers the spread like 75% of the time or something like that. So history would say Georgia's probably due for a little bit of a butt beating tonight against Florida, but hey, there's still that 25% where that doesn't happen, so who knows?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the head coach the last time Georgia started 13-1 was Herman Stegman. who Stegman Coliseum is named after. So that kind of tells you the rare era they're talking about. And, I mean, at the end of the day, them getting ready for that game, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night against Florida, they've just got to do a better job on the boards. Auburn had 50 rebounds in that game on Saturday, and Florida leads the country. I think they're averaging right around 46 rebounds a game. Got to, make it somewhat close, or otherwise it might be ugly down in Gainesville.
Yeah, that I do think that the ability to, especially defensive rebound, is going to end up being the thing that hurts this team in the long run.
Yeah, and it looked like Santos Real, it looked like he might have been actually injured when he came back in the game. That was the biggest moment for Georgia, and I think this is where they're going to be leaning on those bigs a lot in this game. But you know what, man, Wilkinson in that game, and then Blue, they're really turning it on. Those guys are playing outstanding basketball right now, and dare I say, Blue Kane, NBA prospect. I think at this point he's kind of taking that next step. So yeah, I'm interested to see the team that can they crack, let's say 83 over under. They score 83 against Florida. What do you take?
I'll go over.
I'll probably go under. I think they're in for a rude awakening tonight.
I'll say 82-90 is where I was thinking. So I was trying to be a little aggressive with the line there. But yeah, I think that this one's going to be kind of a little bit of cold water, but it's also this is where you learn a lot about this team and learn what you need to fix.
And we've talked about this a bunch, going on the road in the SEC, especially against a team. I know they're not the same team, but going against a team that won the national championship last year, these are not the types of games that you look at your schedule at the beginning of the season and say you're expecting to go on the road and win in Gainesville. So I think as much as nobody wants the silver linings of it all, I don't think a negative outcome tonight really means that much in terms of what Georgia's going to be able to do. It'll just tell you a little bit more about how strongly you should probably feel about this team.
All right, before we get out of here, man, what a busy couple of days for Atlanta Pro Sports, and it started Sunday night. Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot out for the Falcons. Kipp, you are a resident Falcons fan. How did you feel when you saw the news on both? Who do you want as the next head coach as well as the next general manager? I know you're very emotional, so I'll let you kind of...
I'm just thinking about this, but my wife told me that she thinks that the entire street knows the exact moment when the news broke that the Falcons were firing Raheem Morris. And then, there was a follow-up, 10 minutes later whenever it was Terry Fontenot too. Yeah. I can't believe they did it. I was shocked. I thought Arthur Blank's he won the last 4 games, but he's done that before. We saw that, just has it been 7 years now since they actually kept Dan Quinn? I'm going to go 0-5 the next season. Credit to Arthur Blank for just doing it. And honestly, every single name I've heard so far, any of these guys, actual legitimate head coaches and legitimate general managers, it would be a huge step up. Granted, the Falcons are probably going to be pretty bad next season, given you don't even know what they're going to have at quarterback, and they don't have the first round pick. But I think very positive, the most positive 72 hours you could have as a Falcons fan, to beat the Saints and then spend a little bit of time going, oh man, does that mean that everyone's coming back? And then the complete changeover in the front office and the head coach, that's the best week you could actually have as a Falcons fan, as you look at the NFC South and see that you're tied for first and not playing in the playoffs because you're eliminated December 7th. I think at the end of the day, that's why these changes have to be made when there's a losing record division winner and you were still somehow eliminated a month earlier. It's really hard to do that. And we found a way to do that. So excited for that. It seems like it's up and down of the 3 sports franchises in Atlanta, where as soon as one starts to go up, the other starts to go down. So I got maybe 12 hours of enjoying the Falcons before it seems like the Hawks are trending in a completely different direction. And that one hurts, man. Like just seeing what Trae Young gave to Atlanta and seeing the way that everyone packed his bags for him and sent him out the door when he got to play 37 possessions, 40 minutes with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Kristaps Porzingis before he's now being sent out of town. Like, never once did he ever get to play a full season with an all-star in Atlanta, and yet he's getting the blame for how mediocre the Hawks team is. But you know what? That's it. Thank him for his time in Atlanta and everything he gave to the Hawks as being the third all-time in an assist per game. And we'll just move on to the Jalen Johnson era and see how it goes.
Starting with the Falcons piece of it, shocked that they moved on from both. I could have heard a case for keeping Terry Fontenot, but I get moving on. I was so ready for Raheem Morris to be fired, it wasn't even funny. And I say that as someone who was down with the hire at the time. I thought that it had a chance to work, just didn't. And I am not going to miss watching him look up at the scoreboard and watching the video, even though if that's not his fault, man, it made him look really bad. I think I'm in on Clint Kubiak, the Seahawks offensive coordinator. I want an offensive guy to come in. And I've been kind of surprised just seeing like the talk around the NFL. A lot of people perceive this job as the best among the open ones, which really surprises me because they don't have a quarterback and they don't have a first-round pick. But I guess it's just the pieces they've had, the guys they've drafted, and the young talent that they have, people are excited about. As far as GM, Ian Cunningham is the guy that I think makes a ton of sense with Matt Ryan, presumably coming on board as a president or whatever role they have started for him. He played with Ryan Poles, the Bears general manager at Boston College, so there's connections there. I'd be down for that. I would prefer an offensive head coach, and I think that GM move makes a lot of sense. As someone who admittedly doesn't watch the Hawks a ton, I would be sad to see Trae Young move on, but I think it's time. I mean, like, it's just the run to the Eastern Conference Finals was as far as they could get. And it doesn't seem like it's working. So I think it's time to move on. I don't know if they'll be able to get anything back for him, but I like what they've got in Jalen Johnson and hope they just make the most of Jalen's time because he's a really talented guy, just from what I've gotten to see. Ben, unmute and give me your thoughts on the Falcons and the Hawks, just where things are with both teams, what you want to see from both teams.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it does seem like the Falcons are an appealing job opening right now. I guess, and it's weird, I guess there's a bit of an irony to it. I guess there's a part of that is what Fontenot left the roster with. Like, he didn't do a terrible job. This most recent draft class was going to be probably his best draft class that he had. And some of the first round pieces that never seemed to quite hit along the way really all started to bottle up in those last 5 games, which to Kipp's point is why I thought that they weren't going to go this way. And I think that there was sort of a rejoicing around the Falcons fan base, like, oh, there is going to be a clearing of house, even though things did start to look right there at the end. I don't know who the best options are for head coach or GM or whatever they end up doing with any of that. But, it'll be fascinating to see what they do at the quarterback position, because I think that will be the first thing that they try and figure out what is the future of. And maybe that's not an answer that we have this year, but they will have to create that plan for how they're going to go about building the quarterback position, or sticking with what they have, or who knows. I have no idea what that's going to look like. On the Hawks side of things, everyone knows, I'm a Trae Young guy. I've been a Trae Young supporter throughout all of this. The Hawks cannot win with him in the rotation right now. I don't know why that is. I can't explain it. I know Trae Young haters will say he takes stupid shots, and they'll say he can't play defense, he doesn't rebound. And I'm not saying that any of those things aren't necessarily true. I'm just saying that there are other all NBA players that you could also point that to that maybe were involved in Trae Young trades over the years, that also you could make those same criticisms about the people have gone and gotten 4 first-round draft picks for. So, and people act like it's the worst thing in the world when you trade those guys. So it's a shame that it played out this way. I do think he was successful for the Hawks over the years, but I do think the rotation is just plainly better right now when he's not in it, and I don't know why that is. I don't know what you can get for Trae Young at this point in time, and that's the concerning part of it is, You watch a Luka Doncic go get traded for Anthony Davis and a bunch of first-round picks that turn into Cooper Flagg. Like, can the Hawks even get a first-round pick for Trae Young? I would like to think that the guy that has led the NBA in assists for half a decade, you can get a first-round pick for, but I don't know how many teams out there he's a fit for. And so I do think the Trae Young era is over in Atlanta for all intents and purposes. But I think that if they can get anything for Trae Young, that there's a chance that they're going to be able to make something out of it, because I do like the roster construction that they have as it is. And it was playing good ball until Trae came back. And I'm not saying that's Trae's fault. He's just a gravitational force. I mean, they're 5 games above 500 and 4th in the East, Kit, before Trae Young comes back.
They were 29th in defensive rating in the month of December. He only came back for 3 games. The Raptors played them out of the building yesterday, and he was not on the court.
I'm a Trae Young guy.
Bad without him. They are bad without him.
They were 17 and 12 without him. They were 4th in the East without him. He comes back. I don't care that it was only for 3 games. He comes back. And look, I am the Trae Young guy. Like, I am the Trae Young stan. I will tell people for the rest of time that Luka Doncic is the most overrated basketball player who ever lived because of how much of a Trae Young guy that I am. But you can draw a line in the sand when the Hawks season took a turn for the worse, and it was when Trae Young came back. And was he involved in all those games? No, but it threw off everything that they had done.
Kristaps Porzingis was not on the court when he came back. That's kind of the point. You got him for the first time in his career, and the guy can only play 1 out of every 5 games.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of this roster. They're not.
The Hawks knew when they signed Kristaps Porzingis that he had a syndrome that you do not want to be paying $30 million.
Don't do that.
They took a shot at it. That's fine. That's totally fine. But I'm just saying, Trae Young's gone, and the Hawks are going to end up winning more games over the next 3 years than they won over the last 3 years.
Now that one I'll be interested to see, because I mean,
and I'm a Trae Young guy. I love Trae Young.
They're not playing good right now, and they have all these guys that everyone says are better without Trae Young.
And but I think they're not playing good right now because they brought Trae Young back. You have the gravitational force.
His existence is why the Hawks aren't good right now. The fact that he's sitting in the building, they're like, oh, we're going to go out
he
there.
Plays the games, and you just played for a month and a half without him, and you have to play entirely different basketball when Trae Young is playing versus when Trae Young is not playing. Trae Young comes back in, you have to entirely change the way that you play the game, which is the exact reason why nobody is going to take him in a trade.
I said on the board last night that somehow last night's loss would get put on Trae Young too, when he's not even playing. And he missed the game before that too, that they got smoked. He's getting blamed for losses where he's not on the court.
Correct, but
that's the last 7 games. Go look at the record and how they've done the last 7 games and get back to me. I think he's having an impact.
But what was their record before he came back? Before he came back?
That was for 12 games, and those teams they went 5-5 against teams that had winning records during that stretch. So they were a middle of the road team for 10 games, and that is your data point for Trae Young, this team being better without Trae Young. 10 games.
I'm a Trae Young guy, and this Hawks team is better without Trae Young, period.
I hate to interrupt you guys, but I got to get the reaction to this. The beauty of us recording live, it's 1:05 p.m. Eastern time. Damon Wilson is entering the portal. Ben, he's coming back to Georgia, right?
That's an interesting one.
That's how you settle a lawsuit right there. You go ahead and just give them the money that you thought he was worth to begin with, and then there you go. That's the problem solved right there.
That is actually fascinating right there.
Don't expect him to come back to Georgia, just saying that, so no one hears that.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. Go ahead and mark Georgia off. Well, as much as I enjoyed the Hawks conversation, we need to do this more often. We're going to end the episode. I want to do this first. Shout out Stephen Fowler. He sent us a new outro of this podcast that I have just refused to give him credit for about a month. It's like every time we get done recording, I'm like, man, I was supposed to shout out Fowler. So finally, shout out. Love the new intro and outro. He does a great job setting us up well on the podcast. Thanks to everyone who watched and listened to this live, everyone everyone who is checking it out after the fact, please go subscribe to Dawgs247.com. There is a ton of transfer portal intel on there. We'll have the latest on draft decisions as well. Be sure to subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. That helps us out a ton. Subscribe to the YouTube Dawgs247. Subscribe to the TikTok as well. Lots of good content. We are continuing to keep this thing rolling. Football season, basketball season won't be long. Olivia Sayre is going to be all over baseball season. Great time to sign up and join us on the Junkyard. And you can join Kipp and you can join Ben in that Hawks off-season, or the regular season thread, I should say. And we've also got the Falcons off-season thread going as we keep up with who's going to be the next head coach and who's going to be the next GM. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.